Okay, so let's talk now about ADHD, which is something very personal to me because I do have ADHD. So, what does that mean? That acronym ADHD stands for Attention Deficit and Hyperactivity Disorder and is typically considered a disease by medical doctors, and there are evidence that there are many causes to it, simply genetical factors, and there are even some research showing that these genetical mutations might have been evolutionary advantages in the past before like modern society, but there are other causes such as trauma during infancy and like problems during pregnancy or even abuse of ADHD medication, which are psychostimulants, uh, by people who do not have ADHD. And ADHD, I think it's a special education need that gets a lot of attention nowadays and negative attention and negative awareness. People say and ask very often why are there so many children with ADHD right now and so many children taking ADHD medications? And there is a whole stigma around it, and there is definitely overprescription of ADHD medication. I'm not denying that, especially in countries like the United States, Brazil, Iceland. But ADHD is an actual special educational need, is an actual, I don't want to say disease, but that since my training is to become a medical doctor, that's how it seems. So yeah, it is an actual condition, and that many children have, and the fact that like nowadays you have way much more diagnosis of ADHD is just because of an increase of awareness. And yes, this increase has some relationship with the fact that pharmaceutical companies such as Novartis, which produces Ritalin, or the likes of it, do put pressure on neurologists and other doctors to diagnose ADHD more often so they can prescribe or use this pressure, which is also the cause, for instance, of the opioid crisis in the United States. So yes, it contributed to that, but also now we understand ADHD better. And in fact, medication is not the solution, and it shouldn't be, although it has its uses. And I think I'm gonna make a completely different video just talking about the ADHD medication specifically. But it's important to separate those two things. So the main symptoms a person with ADHD experiences, which are normally worse in childhood, but they continue until adult life. There is not a cure. Also, like cure under quotation marks because I don't like to see it as a disease. But so it's a lack of attention in general, hyperactivity. It's very hard to stay still, do the same thing. You lose track of what you're saying, you lose track of your stream of consciousness, you can put it like that. Perhaps you start doing an activity and in the middle of it you kind of forget what you're originally going to do. You do things that can be silly, like putting your cell phone on the fridge or the remote on the fridge and things like that, because just lack of attention in general. And yeah, losing a lot of stuff like the keys, your cell phone, just because like you left them somewhere and you didn't like focus on that. And for studying, it can create a lot of obstacles. It is hard to pay attention to lectures, especially if they're only like you sit down and you have to listen, and there's no interactive factor into it. It's hard, almost impossible. Sometimes I start paying attention to a lecture and I'm thinking, oh, like today now I'm managing to pay attention, and like it derails from that, and I completely lose my focus. And even reading and studying with textbooks can be hard. You study, you read a paragraph over and over again, but like the word, you're like listening to the words in your mind as you read, but you're not processing them. And and not only studying, that happens also with like entertainment and movies and TV shows. I love TV shows, for instance, and sometimes I have to rewind and rewatch the same thing like 4 or 5 times because I wasn't paying attention at all. Like some aspect of the TV show, I don't know, like this chair shows up, which I think is interesting, and I start thinking about that, and like I lose complete track of like the main plot of the story. So people think it's only associated with study, but no, it affects every aspect of our lives, and it can be a life-threatening condition because, especially in like nowadays in like the fast lives that we live in urban environments, yes, sometimes we can have some reckless behavior while, for instance, crossing the streets or being in places which are potentially dangerous. So yes, that is a factor and something that a person with ADHD has to always keep in mind and keep just be attentive. But so yeah, it permeates every aspect of the patient's life, not only his academical pathway. So, and yeah, it's just like something you have to learn to live with. I guess that really there isn't a cure because first it's not a disease, and like it's just the way the brain is wired. It's different, and just have patience with people with ADHD, and learn how to deal with them, with us, because we're just like a little bit different, and understanding is key. Sometimes, yes, we're not paying attention to what you just said to us, but it's not because we're not interested. It's just like how our brain operates. And yeah, like we were like somewhere else, even though physically we were there. So I think that pretty much sums up ADHD from uh, like non-scholarly view of it. I don't want to get into too many medical terms, but I think like yeah, that's my experience as someone with ADHD. Even I think like you can notice during the video that I lost track because I'm doing these videos like in a non-scripted way. But yeah, that's what having ADHD looks like. And so, but I hope this video was informative, and yeah, thank you for the attention.